The glass tower rose into the gray morning sky like it owned the city beneath it. Inside, everything moved with precision. Polished floors reflected expensive shoes. Voices were low, confident, practiced. People here didn't hesitate. They didn't stumble. And they certainly didn't allow disruptions. At the very top floor, a long table stretched across a boardroom wrapped in glass. Screens glowed with charts and numbers. Men and women in tailored suits sat upright, tablets in front of them, eyes fixed forward. At the head of the table stood the man everyone waited for. He spoke calmly, but every word carried weight. Deadlines. Profits. Restructuring. A decision made by him could cost thousands their jobs or make investors millions. He didn't raise his voice. He never had to. Authority lived in his posture, his stillness, the way the room leaned toward him when he spoke. "By next quarter, I want results, not excuses," he said, fingers resting lightly on the table. "If you can't deliver, we'll find someone who can." No one argued. Pens moved. Notes were taken. The meeting was moving exactly as planned. Then the doors slid open. The sound was soft, almost apologetic, but it was enough to break the rhythm. Heads turned. Brows furrowed. Security stiffened. A little girl stood in the doorway. She was small, thin, wearing a faded sweater that looked one size too big. One shoe was black, the other dark blue. Her hair was tangled, tied back with a loose elastic that had slipped halfway down. She clutched a pink backpack to her chest as if it were the only thing holding her together. For a moment, no one spoke. "Hey," one of the guards said gently, stepping forward. "You can't be in here." She shook her head quickly, eyes wide but determined. "I need him." Her finger lifted, pointing straight ahead. Straight at the man at the head of the table. A murmur rippled through the room. Confusion. Mild annoyance. A few uncomfortable glances. The man didn't look at her at first. "This meeting is private," he said flatly. "Please remove her." The guard hesitated, crouching slightly to be closer to her level. "Sweetheart, where are your parents?" Her grip on the backpack tightened. She swallowed hard. "Sir," she said, voice trembling but clear, "my mom didn't wake up." The words didn't belong in this room. They hung in the air, raw and wrong, cutting through graphs and profit margins like a blade. The man looked up. And froze. His face drained of color so fast it startled everyone watching. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked onto the child as if the world beyond her had vanished. For the first time since anyone could remember, he said nothing. A second passed. Then another. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. One of the guards glanced back, uncertain. The man took a step forward. Then another. Slowly, as if afraid the girl might disappear if he moved too fast. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly at his sides. "Everyone out," he said suddenly. "What?" one of the executives asked. "We're in the middle of—" "No," he snapped, voice sharp enough to cut steel. Silence followed. Chairs scraped back. Tablets snapped shut. No one argued. They filed out quickly, confusion etched on their faces, whispering among themselves as the doors slid closed behind them. The room was empty now. Just the man, the guards, and the little girl. He knelt in front of her, bringing himself eye level. The power he carried moments ago seemed to evaporate. His voice came out low, strained. "Where is she?" The girl's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for far too long. "At home," she whispered. "I tried to wake her. I shook her. She didn't move. I didn't know what to do." His chest tightened. He recognized her now. The curve of her face. The eyes. A reflection he saw every morning in the mirror and had spent years avoiding. "How did you get here?" he asked. "I took the bus," she said quietly. "Mommy told me once that if I was ever scared and she couldn't help, I should find you. She said you worked in the big glass building?" Guilt hit him like a physical blow. He stood abruptly, turning away for a moment, dragging in a shaky breath. When he faced her again, his expression was no longer controlled. It was raw. Exposed. "Get my car," he ordered the guards. "Now." One of them hesitated. "Sir, do you want us to call?" "No," he repeated. He reached for his jacket, hands shaking as he slipped it on. The girl watched him carefully, as if afraid he might change his mind. "Will you come?" she asked softly. He nodded once. "Yes." They moved quickly through the halls, past stunned employees who whispered as the most powerful man in the building walked beside a child who didn't belong there. Elevators were cleared. Phones buzzed. No one dared ask questions. Inside the elevator, the silence was heavy. The girl sat on the bench, feet dangling, staring at the floor. He stood in front of her, hands clenched, mind racing. Regret pressed down on him from every direction. Years of distance. Of silence. Of choosing ambition over responsibility. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. He opened the car door himself, something he hadn't done in years. She climbed in, clutching her backpack. As the car pulled away, the city blurred past the windows. Towers gave way to older buildings. Shiny streets turned into cracked pavement. Each mile felt like a step back into a life he had abandoned. He stole glances at her, noticing how exhausted she looked. How small. How alone. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. She nodded but didn't respond. The car finally stopped in front of a worn apartment building. Paint peeled from the walls. The entrance light flickered weakly. It was nothing like the world he lived in now. She pushed the door open before he could help, moving with urgency. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of cleaning solution and old carpet. She ran ahead, stopping at a door halfway down. "This is it," she said. He followed her in. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Toys were neatly stacked in a corner. A half-finished cup of tea sat cold on the table. Everything looked paused, as if time had stopped suddenly. She led him to the bedroom. "She's here," she whispered. He stepped inside, and the air seemed to leave his lungs. The woman lay on the bed still, peaceful in a way that felt cruel. He rushed to her side, checking her neck, her wrist, refusing to accept what his instincts already knew. Nothing. His hands shook harder now. "No, no," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He pulled out his phone. "Call an ambulance," he snapped to the guards behind him. The girl stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on her mother. "Is she sleeping?" she asked. He turned toward her, heartbreaking. "They're coming to help her," he said softly. "You did good. You were brave." Sirens began to echo faintly in the distance. He looked back at the woman on the bed, regret burning through him. And in that moment, standing in a small apartment far from his glass tower, he understood something too late. Some meetings can wait. Some decisions can't. The sirens arrived too late, but they arrived loudly, cutting through the quiet hallway like a harsh reminder that time did not pause for regret. Neighbors stepped out of their apartments, some in slippers, some holding phones, whispering as uniformed paramedics rushed past them. Eyes followed the powerful man standing frozen beside the bed, his expensive suit starkly out of place in the modest room. The paramedics moved with efficiency. One checked the woman's pupils. Another pressed gently on her chest, then looked at his watch. Their movements slowed, then stopped altogether. A brief glance passed between them, one that carried a truth no one wanted to hear. "I'm sorry," one of them said quietly, standing upright. "She's been gone for several hours." The words landed like a collapse. The little girl made a sound that barely registered as a cry. It was small, broken, as if her voice itself didn't understand what had just happened. She took a step forward, reaching for her mother's hand, but hesitated, looking back at the man as if asking permission. He nodded, throat tight. She touched her mother's fingers gently. "Mommy?" she whispered. "I brought him." There was no response. The man turned away sharply, gripping the edge of a nearby dresser, his shoulders tense. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror above it, Older than he remembered, eyes hollow, confidence shattered. This was not a failed deal. This was not a bad quarter. This was a life he had walked away from, lying still because he had chosen distance instead of courage. The paramedics quietly packed their equipment. Paperwork followed. Procedures. Questions. Everything felt mechanical, cruelly normal. Outside the apartment, words spread quickly. Someone recognized him. Phones were lifted discreetly at first, then openly. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into quiet speculation. "That's him," someone said. "The billionaire. What's he doing here? Is that his kid?" Social services arrived not long after. A woman with a clipboard and kind but cautious eyes knelt in front of the girl, speaking softly. The girl answered in short sentences, her voice flat, as if emotions had already burned through her. The man stood nearby, listening, feeling something unfamiliar crawl up his spine. Fear. "She'll need temporary placement," the woman said gently, standing and addressing him without judgment. "Until we locate next of kin." He straightened. "She's not going anywhere." The woman paused. "Sir, are you a legal guardian?" The question cut deep. "No," he said quietly. "But I should have been." That wasn't enough. Rules were rules. Papers mattered more than intentions. The girl was gently led away to sit on a chair in the hall while arrangements were discussed. She didn't cry again. She just stared at the floor, legs swinging slowly, backpack still clutched to her chest. He watched her, helpless. For the first time in decades, his influence meant nothing. By evening, the apartment was empty. The woman's body had been taken away. The neighbors retreated behind their doors. The hallway lights buzzed softly, indifferent. The girl was escorted to a temporary care facility for the night. He stood outside the building long after everyone else had left, staring up at the cracked windows, the flickering light where her bedroom had been. His phone buzzed endlessly in his pocket. Board members. Assistants. Reporters. He ignored them all. The next day, headlines began to circulate. Photos of him leaving the apartment. Blurry shots of the little girl beside him. Speculation filled the gaps facts hadn't yet reached. Questions followed him everywhere. At the office, conversation stopped when he entered. People avoided his eyes. Others stared too long. The boardroom that once felt like a throne now felt like a courtroom. During a meeting, an executive cleared his throat. "Sir, investors are concerned. The media is—" "Cancel the meeting," he said. "But—" "I said cancel it." He walked out. At the care facility, the girl sat at a small table, coloring without enthusiasm. She looked up when he entered, her eyes searching his face. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would," he replied. She hesitated. "They said I might have to live with people I don't know." He crouched in front of her, choosing his words carefully. "I'm working on it." "Are you busy?" she asked. The question struck harder than any accusation. "I used to be," he said honestly. "Not anymore." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, as if filing the answer away. Days passed. Meetings were skipped. Contracts delayed. His assistant begged him to reconsider his priorities. The board pushed back harder with each absence. "You're risking everything," one of them said during a tense call. "Your reputation. The company." He listened calmly. "I already risked something more important once," he replied. "And I lost it." The funeral arrangements were simple. Too simple for a woman who had carried everything alone. He paid for it quietly, without announcements, without cameras. At the service, he stood in the back, watching the girl clutch a folded paper in her hands. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and unfolded it with shaking fingers. "I don't know how to say goodbye," she said softly, voice echoing in the small room. "But Mommy always said I was brave. So I'll try." Tears slid down faces around the room. Afterward, distant relatives appeared, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. One lingered too long, eyes sharp, calculating. Later that afternoon, he was handed a notice. Someone was contesting custody. Anger flared hot and fast. Not for himself, but for her. Court dates were set. Papers stacked high. Lawyers advised caution. Public opinion shifted wildly. Some praised him. Others condemned him for arriving too late. He attended every hearing. When asked why he hadn't been involved sooner, he didn't deflect. He didn't excuse himself. "I was afraid," he said simply. "And I was wrong." The girl sat behind him during the final hearing, feet swinging, watching his back like it was the only solid thing left in her world. When the judge spoke, the room held its breath. He felt it then, not the weight of power, but the weight of responsibility. And this time, he didn't step away. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a place where lives were reduced to statements and signatures. He sat straight on the hard bench, hands folded, eyes forward, listening as arguments were made about a child who had become the center of a quiet storm. Lawyers spoke in careful tones, choosing words like tools. Family members he barely recognized painted themselves as stable, suitable, familiar. They spoke of bloodlines and tradition, of what was best. The girl sat behind him, legs swinging slowly, shoes brushing the edge of the bench. She didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched him, as if his back alone could shield her from whatever decision would fall from above. When it was his turn to speak, the room shifted. The judge leaned forward slightly. The lawyers stopped whispering. He stood. For the first time in his life, he didn't rely on strategy. He didn't calculate outcomes or soften truths. He told it exactly as it was. "I wasn't there," he said, voice steady but stripped of pride. "Not because I didn't know. Not because I couldn't help. But because I chose not to. I chose ambition. I chose distance. And I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the room. "I can't undo that," he continued. "I can't bring her mother back. I can't erase the nights she cried or the mornings she woke up alone. But I can be here now. Fully. Permanently. Not as a benefactor. Not as a visitor. As her father." He paused, swallowing hard. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said. "But she does." Silence followed. Heavy. Expectant. The judge studied him for a long moment, then glanced toward the girl. "Do you want to say anything?" The girl's feet stopped swinging. She stood slowly, clutching the strap of her backpack like a lifeline. Her voice was small but clear. "He came when I asked," she said. "He didn't leave. That was all." The decision came minutes later, but it felt like hours. Temporary guardianship was granted. Supervised at first. Monitored. Conditional. It was enough. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Questions were shouted. He shielded her with his body as they walked past, ignoring the noise, the flashes, the sudden interest from a world that had never noticed her before. In the car, she looked up at him. "Does this mean I can stay?" "Yes," he said. "It does." She nodded once, then leaned back against the seat, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Within minutes, she was asleep. That was the moment everything changed. Life slowed in ways he hadn't expected. Mornings began earlier. Breakfasts were messy. Milk spilled. Shoes went missing. Questions came constantly. Simple ones. Hard ones. "Why do people die? Will Mommy see me? Do you know how to braid hair?" He learned. Awkwardly at first. He burned toast. He watched online tutorials late at night. He rearranged his schedule around school pickups and bedtime stories. The office noticed. Meetings were postponed. Deals delayed. His assistant stared at him in disbelief when he left early for a school orientation. "This is temporary, right?" she asked carefully. "No," he said. "This is permanent." At school, whispers followed them. Some parents smiled politely. Others stared. Teachers tread carefully, unsure how to treat the man whose name appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about power and wealth. The girl noticed everything. One afternoon, after a classmate asked why her dad didn't look like other dads, she came home quiet. He noticed immediately. "What happened?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "Nothing." He knelt in front of her. "You don't have to protect me," he said. "I'm here to protect you." Her eyes filled slowly. "They said you won't stay. That important people always leave." The words hit him harder than any courtroom question ever had. He took her hands carefully. "Look at me," he said. She did. "I can lose money," he said. "I can lose power. I can lose buildings and titles and meetings. But I will not lose you. And I will not leave." She searched his face for cracks, for lies, for hesitation. She found none. That night, she asked him to stay until she fell asleep. He did. Sitting on the edge of the bed, reading softly, voice low and steady. When her breathing finally evened out, he remained there long after the book was finished, watching her chest rise and fall, afraid to move, afraid to wake her, afraid of a world where he might fail again. Weeks turned into months. The supervision ended. The social worker smiled when she visited. "She's thriving," she said. "So are you." He smiled faintly. "I'm learning." The final court date arrived quietly, without cameras this time. The judge smiled as she signed the papers. "It's official," she said. "She's yours." He felt something inside him loosen, something he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for years. Outside, the girl looked up at him. "Does this mean you're really my dad now?" He crouched, meeting her eyes. "Yes," he said. "If you want me to be." She didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around his neck tightly. "I already decided," she whispered. That night, they sat together at the kitchen table. She drew pictures while he worked through emails he had ignored for months. At one point, she pushed a piece of paper toward him. It was a drawing of 3 figures. A woman with a gentle smile. A man holding a little girl's hand. A sun above them all. "That's Mommy," she said. "She's watching." He nodded, unable to speak. Later, as he tucked her in, she asked softly, "Do you think Mommy knows you're here now?" He kissed her forehead. "I think she always hoped I would be." The room fell quiet. The city lights glowed through the window. For the first time, his success didn't feel empty. He had missed the beginning. But he would not miss what came next. The years didn't rush past the way his old life had. They unfolded slowly, measured not in deals closed or numbers gained, but in growth marks on the kitchen wall, school calendars taped to the fridge, and quiet moments that once would have seemed insignificant and now felt priceless. The boardroom still existed. The company still thrived. But it no longer defined him. On a clear morning filled with soft sunlight, he stood in front of the mirror adjusting a crooked tie while a familiar voice floated down the hallway. "Dad, you're doing it wrong." He smiled. "I've been tying ties longer than you've been alive." She appeared in the doorway, hands on her hips, braid neatly done, eyes confident. "That doesn't mean you're good at it." She stepped closer, fingers working quickly, fixing what he hadn't noticed was wrong. When she finished, she looked up at him with satisfaction. "There. Now you look like you listen to people." He laughed, a sound that still surprised him sometimes. "I do listen." She raised an eyebrow. "Now you do." The drive to school was filled with chatter about a presentation she had to give. He listened carefully, offering advice when she asked, encouragement when she hesitated. When they reached the school, she paused before opening the door. "You'll come early, right?" she asked. "For the awards?" he said. She nodded. "Some parents don't." "I'll be there," he said without hesitation. She smiled, hopped out, then turned back suddenly and ran to hug him through the open window. "Thanks for not leaving," she whispered before running inside. He sat there for a moment after she disappeared, the weight of that sentence settling deep in his chest. Not as guilt this time, but as purpose. At the office, the framed drawing still sat beside his laptop. It had faded slightly over time, but he never replaced it. People noticed it. Some asked questions. Others smiled quietly. During a meeting, an executive paused mid-sentence, glancing at the clock. "Sir, if we don't move fast, we may miss the window." He closed the folder calmly. "Then we'll find another window." A few years ago, that answer would have been unthinkable. Now it felt right. That afternoon, he arrived early at the school auditorium. He sat in the second row, scanning the room until he spotted her. She waved excitedly, then quickly straightened when a teacher signaled for quiet. When her name was called, she walked to the stage confidently. Not rushed. Not nervous. She held her certificate proudly, scanning the audience until her eyes met his. He stood and applauded harder than anyone else. Later, she ran to him, breathless. "Did you see? I saw everything," he said, kneeling to hug her. "I'm proud of you." Her smile was bright, but there was something softer beneath it. Something deeper. That night, they visited the cemetery together, as they did every year. They stood quietly, flowers placed carefully at the headstone. "I won again," she said softly, as if speaking to someone who could hear. "Dad came early this time." He rested a hand on her shoulder, saying nothing, knowing words weren't needed. "On the way back?" she asked. "Do you think things would have been different if you came sooner?" He thought carefully before answering. "I think we can't change when we arrive," he said. "Only what we do once we're there." She nodded thoughtfully, filing that away like so many lessons she never realized she was teaching him too. Years passed. She grew taller. Louder. Wiser. She challenged him. Questioned him. Forgave him in ways he hadn't known he needed. One evening, as she packed for college, she paused in her room, holding the old pink backpack. The fabric was worn, the zipper barely holding. "You know," she said quietly, "this is the bag I carried when I came to you." He looked up from the doorway. "I know." She hesitated. "I was scared that day." He crossed the room slowly. "So was I." She smiled faintly. "But you came." "Yes," he said. "Because you woke me up." She hugged him tightly, longer than usual. "You saved me." He shook his head gently. "No," he said. "You saved me." On the day she left, the house felt too quiet. He stood in her empty room afterward, touching the wall where the growth marks still remained. Proof of time. Proof of presence. His phone buzzed with messages. Meetings. Flights. Opportunities. He ignored them for a moment longer. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table alone, the old drawing now framed properly, no longer fading, no longer temporary. He realized then that success had never been about reaching the top. It had been about answering when someone called. Far away, a young woman unpacked her things in a new room, confidence strong, heart steady. She carried with her the certainty that when she spoke, someone would listen. Because once, when she whispered, "Sir, my mom didn't wake up," the world's most powerful man had turned pale, stood up from everything he thought mattered, and followed her.